Oh,
It's 11
perfect.
o'clock.
A Bezos countdown. That's like 3, 2, 1, boom. Or it's like, oh, I almost am in space.
Hey, now, settle down.
For only $200,000, you too can almost be in space. You too can think that you're seeing the curvature of the Earth, though you're not.
Hey, don't be making fun of my boy, man.
Your boy. Yeah, just because he's worth $121 billion, everyone sucks up to him. But
Wait,
not
let me
me.
get that. Bend the banjo. Bend like Beckham.
Bend that banjo.
All right, God, I'm going to settle down. This is like too much.
Fat chance, dude.
Let me go to a major chord to cheer everybody up.
Oh, I feel
that
so
cheerful?
much better.
See, I was on that minor chord. Then I went to the major chord. Not so much. Arthur C. Clarke would have liked that.
Arthur C. Clarke would have loved that because there was banjo and then there was no banjo.
All right, let's just get
No,
started here.
I'm sure that Arthur C. Clarke enjoyed good banjo. The unfortunate thing is there has never been good banjo.
Hey, listen, we're going to have trouble here. Listen, we better get
I
started.
am glad that you're way over there that I don't get smacked around.
I'm way
smacked
over.
around for science.
We're maintaining safe distance. And as people have known, I think during the COVID time frame, which I
Yes.
may not be over. Some people think it may not be over.
Well, I believe that we're going into the
I'm not sure which.
number 5 wave.
Well,
I
at
think
least
is what
fourth,
we're doing.
depending on where you are.
Yes, depending upon where you are, we are going into the 5th wave.
Well, and the one thing I do remember was some banjo player. He may have made the T-shirt himself, but it said something about banjo players maintaining social distance for 150 years. Or
And
something
it's
like
not their fault.
that. It's a good
Everyone just like runs away from them.
Okay, I think we need to change the subject. Well, let's get everybody started with radio science
Let's
news.
do it, okay.
Lest they think they're on like another channel.
I certainly don't believe so. Hey,
No.
you guys and gals, if you wanted to put it that way, are listening to Radio Science News. This is July 24th, 2021. You're listening to the beginning of episode number 795 in a series. Any number that ends in a 5, unless it's just 5 itself, is of
true.
course not a prime number. So the factors for you prime number fans out there are 3 and 5 and 53. And Libby's looking at me like, what? There's only one of these banjos? I thought there was one for everyone.
Well, here's a little bit for Arthur C. Clarke. The famous banjo carved from a monolith found in.
Now, there's an idea. Let's carve every banjo into a monolith.
Okay, listen, we've got a lot to cover today, and I'm hoping that when you finally get the folks to the launchpad of science,
Let's do it.
on radiosciencenews.org. I'll let you do that if you
I shall.
proceed with alacrity.
I shall indeed, if I can stop laughing. Okay, so if you want to join us at the launchpad of science for Radio Science News.
That was Roy Clark, Arthur C. Roy Clark.
Arthur Roy Clark, yes.
Okay, anyway,
If you go to my favorite webpage on the internet,
I love that.
I love it. It's www.smartcenter.org, SMARTCENTER.org, and you'll find all kinds of interesting things there. One comes up pretty quick is the words in trifecta rainbow, Radio Science News. And if you click on the link right above that, that takes you directly to
right.
radiosciencenews.org. Now, you could go there directly, but that's no fun because then you
could.
get to miss going the round around.
Well, plus you do want to. It's like if you're on a road trip and you stop at a really great rest stop. That's,
I love
the
rest
Smart
stops.
Center is a good place. Now, when you get to radiosciencenews.org, there's lots of great information, how to click for the
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah,
streaming,
there's all
how
kinds
to
of cool
how to
stuff.
hear the show replayed, in subsequent days, and you will see the T-shirt, the original Radio
see it.
Science News T-shirt, which was A lot of people. I mean, I think I remember once that you guys were working for a college that spent like $50,000 to do a logo or something. You may remember that.
I remember
We'll
that.
leave that aside.
It was ridiculous.
I was at a carnival in Marshall County, and a guy that did, they had, like a little spray booth, and they had all kinds of cool stuff. And I asked him to do this, and he cranked this out.
Cranked it out just like that.
For a $10 T-shirt, and it's absolutely beautiful, and it's
Yeah.
been archived. That's the Radio Science News logo. Now, just because we're kind of getting warmed up here on the show, I brought you some things that I found while I was cleaning out my basement.
Yes, I see one, which
and I
jumps
want you
out
to
pretty quick here.
Well, and the one that I want you to look at concludes that exact logo, because it is, now this should be in the Museum of Nerdology, wherever that will be established. I'm not sure.
Probably just to my left.
To your left there. It's actually from, I'm going to say, it's got to be, because it has our good friend Howard Monroe's radio station, WVLY.net. And Howard was a wonderful kindred spirit, and we did cool things. But this was a Radio Science News pocket protector.
Clear plastic.
Pocket
protector. Comes with its own pin.
From the Smart Center.
Wow, I'm telling you, it's really cool.
Please do not, let's put that on display.
If it were to go up for a
auction?
bid,
Oh my
it
gosh.
could be, I don't know,
It could be
$50.
It could be
It's unbelievable.
I'll give you $1 to get that out of here. So, well, and I'm going to say,
okay.
I'm going to say that you either need to send that to the producers of The Big Bang Theory so they can wear it, or put it on display.
I think we just might have to do that.
So that's our first thing I brought you. Now, the second thing I brought you
is not a trilobite, but a trilobite.
Well, and it's a replica. It's a fossil replica, but it's a very special fossil replica.
and I recognized it immediately. And on the back, is sketched 10/04 for October 2004. And we made this out of concrete, but a special concrete.
That's right.
Reinforced with carbon nanofibers.
And I'm going to give a shout out to at that time a young student. I believe this was a Bridget Kane sign project. Her sister Megan also did some they were really good friends of the Smart Center, and we loved doing stuff with them. But this is actually you look at something like this, and like it's been bouncing around, and it's very durable, as you can see.
Yeah. In fact, while you were in the other room, I accidentally dropped it.
Did it hurt the floor?
It just went right through the floor.
Well,
No, it just it just sort of bounced around. And I was really upset that I might have damaged it.
Now,
I see no damage.
The reason
whatsoever.
why I bring this up is because as a science project that Bridget Kane did, we had located a company. Anyway, they made a product called Graphil, Graphil, and it was, at that time, we were looking at coal-based products that would be better than burning coal.
Everything's better than burning coal.
And in this case, the company had, and this literally came out of all things, one of the few things that I think maybe was an enduring good thing that came out of the Ronald Reagan Star Wars, all the legislation. This company developed a way of using coal in a heating process, and then it was they heated it and it was a vapor, and then it deposited. They actually created They weren't nanotubes; they were nanofibers.
Fibers, yes.
And so if you can imagine carbon nanofibers as the part of the matrix of a composite material. All of a sudden,
extraordinarily strong.
You just think of the thousands of applications and the wonderful things. So the first one, we said, well, let's get something really easy, low hanging fruit. We decided that there should be such a thing as Nanocrete.
Yep.
And we said, well, we're going to come up with
way
this.
back when.
Yeah, and so it's
really cool.
With Bridget Kane, we mixed like a percentage of these. Literally, they're not just like little fibers. They are nanofibers derived from coal. And all we did was simply mix it with a Portland cement and made a little fossil replica. And we thought this will
Poured
be
it into
in fact,
the mold.
When we called the company and talked about it, they said, "Oh yeah, Nanocrete. We were thinking about that too." And we said,
I'm sure you were.
But anyway, so that's something you also maybe should keep on display for people maybe they want to come down and look at it and talk about it. Now, the last thing I have for you are these little. I know that you like fossils.
They look like shells.
Well, the only
but
way,
they're not.
As a good scientist, the only way that you could really, they look like seashells, aren't they beautiful? But if you kind of bite on one, Robert, it turns out that they have A chewy chocolate center.
So when I said, as a good person of science, that I should just put it in my
I would
my
say
mouth and
that
test it,
just as a rule that's not what you should do.
that's
But
not what you should do.
since I
But-
risked my life by eating 10 or 12 of these the other day, they're filled with a nice milk chocolate.
well, you don't seem too bad
Oh,
off.
I'm doing okay. I'm like it.
Huh.
Okay.
So were these lab grown?
No, somebody brought them. They said they brought them back from the beach, but I think it was from a candy store. Okay, Robert, we've got to get this show started because so much happened
Let's
this
do
week,
it.
and some of it was good.
Well, isn't that nice?
Yeah.
So we've got Bezos,
Branson,
Wally Funk,
Saturn V.
Saturn V,
Now you'll know O'Neill.
O'Neill. Yes, I think.
And here's somebody that
Bill Bruno. I
another-
love that guy. He is so cool.
Yeah. And so whatever happened to him? Well, he's not gone.
I'm sure he's not.
And I got to say something. It's really. If we're probably going, I want to spend most of our time with these first bunch of things. We have all these other stories: old virus,
Microbes,
ultrasound,
Sargasso,
and then sharks.
Shark Week,
Oh my God, shark!
Arc Month.
Yeah, I don't know who let this banjo into the studio. but
Who
it's
let
trouble.
this banjo out?
Mars anatomy,
Oh, okay.
and then a big breakthrough in thermoelectric generation. Oh my gosh! And
Cool.
Robert,
Graphene.
when a graphene story
your
shows up,
graphene.
I have to do that.
And then, of course,
Asteroids.
everybody has asteroids.
Well, and this asteroid story is really cool. It's like
Okay.
a primal kind of thing. Now, all I'm going to say is I know that anybody who's been listening to anything, say media-wise, understands that probably 75% of all the news that's going on, and probably should be, is talking about what's going on with COVID
Right.
and the variants. Or are we really looking at, somebody pointed out a couple interesting things I heard this week, just as an aside. One of them, they're talking about all the people that are having what they say breakthrough asymptomatic cases where people are fully vaccinated and get it. And the guy
And
pointed
still
out,
Getting it.
well, wait a minute, you're doing a test that tests for antibodies.
Right.
So his point was it's important to understand whether or not you're looking at antibodies that are as a result of the vaccination, or even antibodies that have been launched by your immune system against, say, that you actually did contract the new Delta or one of the new variants. It's important to understand whether or not you're looking at a successful protection against being infected, or whether it's an actual big new case. And
Right.
that's an important thing. The other one is somebody has pointed out, one of the things we might want to look at is maybe even as a strategy to get people to vaccinate and stuff is that, well, maybe you didn't want a vaccine for that Delta, the original COVID-19, but we might be looking at COVID-20 or COVID-21.
Easily.
In other words, saying that it's an actual, in essence, a different coronavirus. And so you don't have to feel bad that you didn't get vaccinated before, but do it now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that as a positive thing. So I'm just going to say the chart is about COVID issues, and there's a lot of information on there. And we have so many other, I know that's being well covered other
Yes.
places. And for the most part, the biggest thing I just want to say is, please, wherever you get your information, or however you may have been predisposed in the past, or what you really should just go out and get your vaccination,
Yeah.
and then you
And-
can think about things
Right.
later. But
And if you're not sure if you should get vaccinated, it's probably because you're listening to somebody telling you don't do it, and they're making stuff up. What you really ought to do is you should go to the chart. The chart shows you the math. It shows you the unbiased truth, and you can pick it up from there.
hopefully,
Okay? All right.
and I've got a little background music because I want to mostly talk about, and I hope people will forgive Robert and I for basically being we are, I hate to say it, we're rocket boys. We've been rocket boys studying
From the beginning.
And following it through. And it's been an interesting week because I have some younger friends, and we were talking about the fact that Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon.com, and when we were talking about this, and part of what you have to understand is that in order to finance his Blue Origin, his efforts for space travel, he basically every year he's been selling off $1 billion worth of Amazon stock to finance
It's
what they're doing.
11:15.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Starbucks.
Starbucks.
And so what I want to say is, if you're really critical of the fact that he's a billionaire and he's spending his money to
Right.
do space travel, please remember that he actually has funded it by having a real business that most of us have participated in.
Right.
If there's anybody out there who hasn't either sent or received something through Amazon.com, just raise your hand
Yeah.
and we'll.
Chances are you
have.
have. Yes.
In fact, I was even thinking about we're talking about being on Amazon Prime, and I was thinking, is that like Optimus Prime? I was worried
Yes,
about
I believe it is.
the Transformers. But so let's take a quick look at this is the story about. We're going to do Bezos. We probably should have done Branson because chronologically he was first. But
he didn't actually make it to space.
Well, I know both of them are kind of. So this is about Bezos launches. Well, it says to space.
to space.
Aiming to reignite his rocket company's ambitions. So I actually should do. I should do a little tribute for Branson and Bezos and even Elon Musk, because it's like the billionaires battle it out. And I was thinking about there was a little coincidence in the Bezos launch that you might not have noticed, Robert.
Yeah.
There's a clue in this song of what it is. So this song may remember that I think it's an Appalachian banjo composer who started playing piano and moved to England. I think was where it was, but the lyrics are really cool because it says, "She packed my bags last night, pre-flight." Now here's the part. A lift off 9 a.m.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be high as a kite by 10. All right, I could do the whole song with all the lyrics, but you guys get it that, people take Appalachian music and then make a lot of money on it. But the important thing in this lyric was the liftoff time for the Bezos rocket
was at 9 a.m.
a.m.
Eastern time.
I thought that was pretty
Yep,
interesting.
it was.
The Amazon founder and 3 others lifted off in Blue Origins. It's called the New Shepard spacecraft. Mm-hmm. And what's cool is it says fulfilling a goal more than 20 years in the making. Bezos has been working on this
For a long time.
And part of what I want to... I'm just going to say, I saw a lot of people just, poo-pooing, yes, billionaires playing with this. They could be feeding, hungry children, on and on and on. And all of those things may or may not be true. But one of the things I definitely got a sense of, first of all, I watched the launch, and I'm looking at
I did too. It
there's
was really
3,000 or 4,000 employees that are working, and they're down in this, they're down in the prairie in West Texas, right? And I kept thinking, wait a minute, this reminds me so much of the kind of the way it was. I mean, and they launched it on the same date as the which mission it was. The July 20th was which one was it?
The Apollo 11
it was the
moon landing.
It was the 11th, and so they did all this stuff,
Which I thought was brilliant.
very much in purpose. But I can remember being, watching at a lounge, at WVU or somewhere, that launch. I was in a summer school thing there, and I can just remember all the excitement and everybody thinking about, it was really a big part of everybody's psyche at this time.
Yes, it was.
In fact, I'm going to apologize for a joke I made to somebody who saw all of us young students. I don't know, what was I, a freshman or a sophomore at that time, and he says, "Well, what are all you guys doing here at WVU?" And I told him I was taking up space.
All right.
I
love it.
Meaning it as a joke.
Right.
And then he was appropriately saying, "Well, this is so important that you guys are going to, looking at going into space," because at that time everybody thought, well, we're going to be on the moon with a colony, and then we'll be on Mars, and everything kind of got stalled. This kind of reignited some of my excitement about that. Watching all this going, and part of what I realized, because I would see a lot of people just glibly talk about, oh yeah, billionaires playing, blah, on and on. And I thought to myself, no, you guys don't get this. You don't get it at all. That this is a whole thing. You can either say, let's let's kind of look in this direction. Let's look at some of these things that are happening. Let's look at the possibilities. And we'll talk about some of the things. I mean, for example, one of the big things that Bezos is really into is the idea that, and the way he phrased it was that Earth, the planet Earth, which is so important, should be zoned residential.
I agree.
It should be kept clean, and it's all the polluting industries and the extractive technologies
should not be on the planet.
He just said that we're on the verge of being able to do so many things that if you've been following space travel or science fiction, that instead of digging up everybody's communities somewhere in Africa and then dumping the pollution into the nearest river so that it goes into the ocean. There's a possibility that all those materials can be extracted,
elsewhere.
Say like from asteroids and things like that. And so, I mean, it's kind of a big scenario that he's looking at, and maybe it won't happen in the next couple of weeks. It'll take time. But his concept is that the planet should be zoned residential.
Yes.
And the expanding populations can be, we're going to be looking at one of our topics coming up, or like O'Neill, Gerald, the Princeton scientist O'Neill, who proposed that, when we go off planet, we're going to create these really cool environments that have to be just as wonderful. We're not going to live in like boxes. And if you're a fan of The Expanse, some of the shows that talk about mining the asteroids, and of course they managed to turn all the crappy things that are going on the planet into scenarios for off-planet greed and violence and weapons and all that. But the idea that I think is sometimes missed, and we've talked about this in the past when we were talking about the archaeologists who was talking about England and the fact that they had done all this study of the how things went on in the what was now presently the United Kingdom, and they're following. Well, there were only so many people at one time. You had enough people so that they basically foraged and gathered food and hunted, or they, got clams and mussels and fished around the ocean. And they were so excited if they ever ran into another group of people, and then they would, trade things, or they would intermarry, and they would form alliances, because the whole point was there was such a vast amount of resources and space.
Yes.
And the really articulate thing that this archaeologist said was that at the point where agriculture emerged, and now people could, instead of just sort of like living in a tough, environment with nature, they could now have, maybe twice as many children as they used to have. And they could then farm land and grow more food than they could by foraging or hunting. Right. And then what happened, and this is really weird because we've seen several stories here in the archaeological context that show that when people finally had to own land or had to protect land or they had to farm the land, it produced ownership of land, and it produced get off my land,
right?
And I'm going to kill you if you take my land. That concept is reflected in what he is talking about. So if you could actually now be emerging into a way that people could live in, as we talk about these O'Neill colonies, we'll look at it at this topic here. It's like an unlimited thing, or at least how long would it take you to? He's talking about. Let's not live on Mars. Let's not mess up, Enceladus. Let's stay off of these places and not mess them up, and create, colonies in space.
Exactly.
And even if there are all kinds of really cool things like the Lagrange points. L5, there's an L5 society that talks about locating things in orbits between here and the moon. I mean, that's going to take a long time if you did something like that. But the point is, there's no reason to be fighting with everybody, because you just go, well, I'm going to go, I'll be a couple thousand miles over here in my habitat.
Yeah, one of the things to expand on what you were saying is that one of the difficulties of humans is that we instinctively know, yes, the Earth is vast, but there's only so much land.
That's right.
And if you have land, somebody else wants it.
Yeah.
And that is what is the core for every strife, every war, every hatred from the very beginning. Because it's not just the land to grow food on or the land to grow your castle on, but it's the water rights of that area.
Oh, yeah.
It's the various minerals that are around.
Who gets to be on the beach?
The forest. It's the beach. It's the animals. Yeah, and if you're in charge of that, you suddenly have a vast amount of power. And if there's anything that human beings want to do, it's keep power and grow more.
Well, and the thing is, it's interesting to me that some of these tendencies that we talk about, and again, I'm referring to some things that were kind of proposed by an archaeologist who I mean, to boil it down, this is way too simplistic, but he literally was saying that at a time when it was sort of man against nature,
Yes.
when you had very few humans, relative to the vastness of nature and in the dangers of nature, it was kind of a struggle. But at that point in time, if let's say humankind basically benefited by working together or making alliances and trading and all that kind of stuff, and there is actually good evidence for the fact that this whole concept of warfare and ownership and like protecting your land and taking someone else's land is literally, it's only like a 10 or 20,000 years old. It's not something people go, well, this is the way people have always been.
No, it's not.
And it's probably not
it's
that.
Not. It's a recent.
Well, and it goes
evil.
And it goes. I mean, I don't want to get too philosophical about it because the people go, well, this is a utopian dream. No, I'm actually being practical because, like, let's face it, if people like to do something, like say if people like to be on a beach and surf or fish, and you can figure out a way that, well, there's an unlimited source of what we all want, then everybody can just say, well, great, why don't you take 10 acres and I'll take, and then people could actually get along and cooperate. But this goes to what Bezos. I'm going to read this little part of this New York Times story. It says, in recent years, before he stepped down as chief executive of Amazon, Bezos would typically spend a day a week, usually Wednesdays, focused on Blue Origin. Mr. Bezos himself was seated in the capsule Tuesday, makes plain he's putting spaceflight at the top of his spending list. Because he talked about, they went back about starting in 2017, he announced he would sell $1 billion of Amazon stock each year to fund Blue Origin. And then it goes down, here's his basic overlying theme. The only way that I can see to deploy this much financial resource is by converting my Amazon winnings into space travel. And that's his basic concept of his philanthropy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I mean, I'm thinking about where, people would pay taxes and then the country would have a space program, usually for military benefits. Right. He's basically saying that everybody who has participated in, his lucrative Amazon.com, which some would argue has been a great service in some ways and has provided, a bunch of
jobs.
Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm.
But here's his point. He says the solar system alone can support trillions of humans. If we had 1 trillion humans, we would have 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts and unlimited, for all practical purposes, resources and solar power. Mm-hmm. So he's looking at, and a lot of what he's discussing goes back to Princeton physicist, and Robert and I, of course, in 1970s, this is like
Harold O'Neill.
Yeah, Gerard K. O'Neill, Princeton physicist. So we'll talk about, anyway, the other thing that I loved about this story, and I'm sure other people celebrated this. If you scroll down to this picture, we're on the first link here about Bezos. But if you scroll down, you see them emerging from. It says Blue Origin, first human flight of Blue Origin. Anyway, and everybody's excited, and they've all got cowboy hats, and they're out there on the prairie having a good time.
Yeah.
But the to me, the exciting story is the lady who is emerging, who is Wally
Oh,
Funk.
Isn't she cool?
Well, and first of all, she's like, anyway, there's some cool stuff about this, and we'll talk about this. Let's jump to Wally Funk, because I said, I just love the idea that, first of all, people are going to go, Wally Funk. What is this, like a guy that has a band, that we should hear about? No, this is Wally Funk, and this is wallyfly.com.
Official website for pilot CFIAIATP Wally Funk.
Well, and this is a cool thing because I mean, I want folks to take some time to look at this, enjoy it. This is a person who is 80. The neat thing about
82.
the flight is they had somebody who was in their 80s and somebody who was just
18.
18-year-old. The reason why this is a great story, and Robert and I and his wife Libby have always been huge advocates for women in science. This is a lady who trained and should have been
That's right. Astronaut.
Yeah.
Back in the early 1960s. If you were to talk to my wife, she knows a lot about this wonderful lady and some other women that were training with the original astronauts.
That's right.
And it turns out that every single woman scored higher on every test than every male. Yet, it turns out that
none of them got to
It turned out that they didn't get to go to space, and the reason was, well, you had to be a fighter pilot.
Well, that's
and it turns out
interesting,
that the only way to be a fighter pilot is that you have to be male.
Well, that's true. Now I'm going to click on
really
click on photo album because
sad thing here.
I wanted to click on here. They show some pictures. After taking the Mercury astronaut physical exams, Jerry Cobb, another woman who was in the program, as you say, the thing that they figured out very early on, and even if you're talking about fighter pilots, they actually picked men to be fighter pilots who were optimally like 5'6".
Yeah.
And as you say, there's no question. Look, any woman who's gone through childbirth will tell you that men can't do what women do in many cases. And all the physical aspects of being a fighter pilot, being able to withstand G-forces, on and on and on and on, women were superior. Anyway, these are some pictures. And one of them that I want to just call your attention to is 1988. You see that Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman to fly in space. This is when the Russian space program, they included women in space. We don't talk about that very much. But the really great story for me about this whole Bezos thing, beyond all the stuff that they're kind of advocating, in a more long-term way, is the fact that you have somebody here who represents finally being allowed to go nearly into space.
Yeah.
And that's another kind of a funny issue there. Anyway, let's click to.
Hey,
okay.
Before we do, Libby just brought me a book. It's called Almost Astronauts: 13 Women Who Dared to Dream. The true story of the Mercury 13 women.
There you go.
And it's a wonderful book. Lots of pictures. It's like 130 something pages long, and it's all about this wonderful woman, Wally, and the
folks that,
the other women that should have gone to space. It's just awesome.
Yeah, there's so many reasons why.
Miss Libby.
So many reasons why this is a frustrating thing, especially for wonderfully qualified, intelligent, strong women.
Overqualified.
Yeah. So anyway, hats off to I give hats off to Bezos for including Wally Funk in this,
absolutely.
and Wally Funk for being who she is and what she's done. I'll tell you what, let's take a quick look at the Saturn. I just put this one up because they were talking about the thing that's interesting in this whole. I'm going to call it. They were always talking about the billionaire space race, and all this kind of stuff. But there are really interesting things happening, and one of them is there's a big controversy now because in some ways Elon Musk and SpaceX are kind of ahead of the game because they've put vast money and they have heavier lift things, and they're doing wonderful stuff too. Because if you focus, I want to make a point of saying that these aren't the only three guys doing stuff.
No.
There's lots of other companies, and Robert and I, gosh, we knew people way back when you had Rutan and scaled composites, and you had there were different companies.
Benson and
Benson, yeah.
Yeah, oh boy,
Benson
was he
Aerospace,
phenomenal.
Space Dev, and well, and even I was laughing because I was in an antique store, and somebody had a bunch of these canning jars made by the Ball Company.
Yes.
And they're like collectible, especially the blue glass ones. Like,
Yeah.
oh, they're so cool. And you're going, Ball Company. Their big thing was they made canning jars that had a great seal on the top, and they had technology.
And it is now Ball Aerospace.
Aerospace, yeah. So there's so much going on here, but this particular thing was talking about the fact that, and I thought this was kind of interesting. The launch engine for the rocket that was in the New Shepard was it was a hydrogen oxygen, liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. And I don't want to be critical of all the other people, but some of the things I know that if you saw the Branson's, Dragon and Spaceship One, part of what you saw was they were burning butadiene, which is like a tire. It's like if you could chop up tires in little pieces, and then
that's right,
and it's like smoky
and then set them on fire.
But here you had Bezos, and they're using liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. And they don't even know about magnecular hydrogen.
Not yet.
Not yet. They don't know about it. But one of the things they were talking about was being able to scale up their efforts because they had perfected this one particular engine, the EV, whatever it is, the EV4 or something. But and there was one of the mentions was they have taken over. I don't know whether they were going to tear this down or something, but the government made it known that the original Saturn V test stand was available if somebody had something to do with it, right? And so it says that Blue Origin will upgrade and refurbish the test stand 4670 at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
Just awesome.
To support testing of their BE-3U and BE-4 rocket engines. And of course, the thing that it sounded like from the story I was hearing, it was that the possibility that they could swap their engine into like the basic structure of a Saturn V, and I don't know exactly what they're going to do but the idea is that the one that you saw was a single engine.
Yes.
The Shepard was a single engine of I think it was the BE-4, and their whole point is, well, these are modular and scalable,
right?
So your efforts can be
you can just add them up and essentially lift whatever you want.
Yeah, and the other thing is that they're working on. There's a big contentious issue now because SpaceX got some contract with the government. It has to do with a heavy lift thing to take stuff to the moon, and I guess SpaceX actually sort of has the contract, but then there's been some dispute because Blue Origin claims that because they have, I think, what they're calling the New Glenn launch booster, and they're going to refurbish the test stand. I'm going to say this whole thing is not over. The folks that are doing all this, and I want to jump back if we can. I seem to be jumping around in my little browser.
That's all right.
Let's jump back to Branson for just a second.
Okay.
Because everybody got excited with the Bezos launch this most recently. People go, well, I know they talk about some people are most excited about the thing they saw most recently, but this is from let's see, it was updated. Well, actually, it was updated July 12th. A Virgin Galactic founder Richard Branson and it says it successfully rockets to outer space. We'll talk about all that in a second. Yeah. We'll talk about that in a second. But so here's his effort. This was a cool thing too, and I'm just going to say, the reason why, Robert, you may differ with me. I'm not sure, but I have a real affinity for the idea of I love the idea of like putting just a massive thrusting device on the ground and then just grinding it up into, using lots and lots and lots of energy but part of what Branson, has focused on with Spaceship 2 and the Dragon, or whatever it's called, the Spaceship 1, and I'm looking for what went up today, a winged plane with a single rocket motor. Part of what they're doing, they have the mothership. It's got a twin fuselage mothership, which White Knight 2. And there's a cool, if you scroll down on this, I'm on the thing here, you see, these guys are, so there's this twin fuselage thing, and then they drop the other one. It kind of reminds you, if you're familiar with the Bell X-15.
I was about to say this is hot off the
right.
blueprints of the Bell X-1, the first one to go faster than the speed of sound and survive.
Well, and the only thing
it's a fantastic idea because you can take you're under the wing of a plane. The plane goes to as high as it can go, and so you've got a little bit of velocity. You've got a little bit of height, and so that's velocity and height that you don't have to make up, and then you drop the thing and launch it.
And you push through less atmospheric resistance. And
less air, yeah. It's a if you're going to be doing it on a reasonably small scale, this is a brilliant idea.
Well, and the question of how you could scale it up, that's all still open, because part of what's fascinating to me is I remember one of the cool things back when we were, really head to head with the Russians. One of the things that was interesting about the way the Russians launched their stuff, they actually had like a big long track.
Yeah.
And that, they would actually use the Earth's gravity
to pull it down
to, in a brilliant kind of design, to pull it down, and it would and then it would, go up at an angle.
Right.
One of the things that, just from a common sense point of view, it'd be kind of like if I don't know, if I wanted to go to the Highlands today, Robert, I could either like take off here from the Highlands and start running, or maybe I could take a bus and get off right next to the Highlands and then just walk into it. The other part that I think is really fascinating is as much as I really applaud the engineering skill and the technical abilities, that is, if you look at what they've done with SpaceX and what they've done with New Shepard, the ability to reuse something by actually doing it's like you're watching. If you saw old science fiction movies where they were trying to show a rocket landing,
right.
they would just run it in reverse, because the idea that you're going to take off from a static position with a big thruster, and then you're going to bring it back down and you're going to reverse that, it means that you're going to also take a lot of energy to do it. The idea of getting into a plane, let's call it, and what I'm basically saying is that I applaud and I appreciate the concept of Branson using the space plane concept.
I do too. I believe it's brilliant.
And I think that's going to be the winner. I'm just saying that from my point of view.
What needs to happen is Branson's plane needs to go about 10 times faster.
Yeah.
It needs to be able to enter the atmosphere going 10 times faster.
Right.
So you've got to have some kind of a heat shield. There needs to be more of an active a landing, as opposed to just as
a shuttlecock kind of concept.
This shuttle glider.
Well, and when
but for a first couple tries, really cool.
Well, and
really cool.
I'm just saying that it also makes a lot of sense. The idea that you're always going to be strapped in and you're going to experience so many G's of force to escape Earth's gravity, and the other thing too is that you're starting from if anybody who's taken a physics class will understand, like, they're talking about, like, if you're trying to slide something along a table, first of all, you're going to overcome the initial, to get it from an immobile position to moving
at all
is like, that's the big, once it's moving at all, then it's a matter of, you can accelerate the motion.
Right.
And of course, you want to eliminate friction and all that other kind of stuff. But there just are huge advantages. The reason why the space shuttle kind of was going, a lot of people were looking at that as the idea of something that could take off, and land. And initially they couldn't really get anything that heavy to just like take off.
No.
But Branson has basically shown that the proof of concept that you can do something like this, and then the question of how you scale it. I mean, other people have talked about having, launching things from balloons or some. There are all kinds of other things where you're thinking.
It's 11:45.
Thank you, Starbucks. If you could actually make something that's more along the concept of a space plane, where you take off, you go to Pittsburgh Airport, and there's the let's say there's a 4-mile runway, and the whole point is that this big thing starts off very slowly and then accelerates, and I mean I've seen concepts where they're talking about. Not only heavy lifting like a dirigible kind of things, but aerodynamic dirigible kind of things. The idea is that so you don't spend $1 zillion in fuel and all kinds of technical issues of how you take off and land. You just float up as high as you can, and then you take off from there.
Right.
You don't have to travel that huge the gravity well that you're in, and so I think some of those things they're all going to come along. So anyway, I'm saying that it's great that all these different people and others are working on this stuff.
Yeah.
And
I love the fact that they're not all trying to do the same thing.
No, and the other part of it is that they've tied the idea that there are bigger things besides just government versus government, which typically means we're going to be talking about weapons or defense or protecting territory, on and on and on. So anyway, one of the overarching concepts, no matter how we get into space or who puts us into space, is this concept. The next link I have is O'Neill, which is Gerard K. O'Neill, who went to Princeton, and this is a thing that if you're not familiar with this, I have to say that. For those of us who have been science fiction aficionados even before Star Trek or even before Star Wars, because a lot of people think, well, that's the whole thing, man. It's everything with Star Trek. Or this concept has been around it's been around as long as science fiction in some forms. This is kind of an interesting illustration of what they're talking about O'Neill colonies.
Yeah. And the neat thing about them is, the story goes. Oh, my computer just went blank and is firing back up again. I know enough about him to be able to say this. He was a brilliant teacher. He taught physics and nuclear physics and so forth. And back in the 1960s, he gave one of his classes a interesting idea. He said, where and how should humans live in space? And his students came up with the concept that to be living on the surface of a planet, it's a really tough thing to do because number one, the surface of the planet might not be a planet that you can live on. And then you've got the gravity well problems of getting on and off. Yeah. And they came up with the idea that what if you took some of the resources, the easily accessible resources in the solar system, the smaller asteroids and comets and so forth, and you were to process those and turn them into worlds that are inside out. Yeah. So that you could live on the inside of a world and then you could give that cylindrical or spherical or torus world a spin, and then the inertial forces of that spin would then create whatever a gravity that you wanted. Because one of the things they kept saying was there's no other place in the solar system that has gravity like the Earth. And so they said, well, then maybe you should just make one.
Maybe you should just make one.
Maybe you should just make one. So rather than go, gee, there's no planets in the solar system that we can utilize, he and his students were saying, then we create them.
That's right. Well,
we create them from scratch.
Yeah, and
brilliant idea.
Now the thing is, I'm looking down here as a paragraph. It says O'Neill once asked the Space Science Institute that he founded. He says, "What will space colonies be like? First of all, there's no point in going out into space if the future that we see there is a sterile future of living in tin cans.
Right.
We have to be able to recreate and recreate in space habitats which are as beautiful as Earth-like as the loveliest parts of planet Earth, and we can do that.
We can.
Yeah, so here they're talking about Bezos has kind of taken up that idea, and in discussions that we could tell he's enthusiastic about it. One of the things he points out, if you look at the illustrations that many people, the artist concepts of O'Neill type colonies, one of the big things is they're huge. Like they talk about something that's several miles, a huge giant torus or sphere, and maybe has 1 million people. Now, one of the things Bezos is talking about is that first of all, if you're in space and you wanted to be protected from all sorts of cosmic rays and solar flares and all kinds of other things, one of the things may be is that you will. Not that I want to imply that the hollow Earth theory is actually true, even though everybody knows the UFOs have been coming out of the North Pole
of course,
for years.
yeah.
The idea would be that you could take an asteroid, or as opposed to having to construct something yourself, and you could literally create one within an asteroid, and you could spin it up, and you could have the same kind of thing. Now, to me, that sounds a little like you'd have the ultimate man cave in that you'd be inside and wouldn't see anything. Now, and I'm just gonna take a second here because at one time when I did a thing with the Governor's School for Math and Science, and the idea was going into space, and I did the same kind of things. I just said, hey, let's figure out some ways that you can do this. And one of the things that people understood pretty quickly was that you can create artificial gravity.
Yes,
and
very easily.
It's very easy to do that. And we were trying to do it with materials that we already had, and all that kind of stuff. And one of the concepts that came out of all these discussions with, and again, these are junior high kids, and we're looking at things, and we're trying to, if people were talking about tetherball, if you're familiar with tetherball, it's a thing where you play a game. They have it's not complicated. Usually you get smacked in the head a couple times if you're not careful, but they have a pole. It's got this like a tall pole. And it has a tether, meaning a rope, and on the end of it is a ball. You could do it with a tennis ball. And then people have like ping pong, you have paddles or whatever, however it works. And the idea is that you're trying to spin this thing clockwise so it wraps around the pole. And the opposing team is trying to spin it counterclockwise. So the tetherball concept merged into the fact that, okay, so you can create gravity by like taking something and swinging it around your head. We did the thing with a bucket of water. Like you take a bucket of water and you realize that that's what you're talking about, an artificial gravity. One of the big deals about creating any of these kind of worlds is that you have to deal with the Coriolis effect and the fact that how big does it have to be before humans don't get basically seasick and all. I mean, those are real issues.
And it turns out that that it has to. The maximum speed at which it can spin is about a seconds.
Yeah.
So it turns out that to be able to have this thing spin as slow as once in 60 seconds
has to be big.
It has to be big.
Yeah. So that's a lot of resource. So basically, I'm just going to say
real
this,
big.
I'm just going to pose this, Robert, for these guys. Maybe Branson could look at this, or we could send this to Elon Musk or Bezos. If they're thinking about those kind of things, what the kids came up with was, okay, you could have. First of all, you don't want to be inside something because you want to see space. You want everything. So, but how do you create that gravity? And the simple concept, which I think is just so elegant, is that you have tethered modules. And when you say tethered modules, you go, well, how could you do that? Well, we actually do have materials, whether carbon fiber or composite materials, strong enough that you could have let's say it's a fairly large habitat, and then you basically have a matching fairly large habitat at either end of a tether.
Right.
And then you spin them up, and you'll create the artificial gravity that you want. But all the resources that you've used are and basically, when you were talking about the speed, to eliminate the Coriolis effect and all those kind of things, it could be really far apart.
Yes,
If you're in space, you could have a 2-mile tether.
Yes.
Or whatever. You could have a habitat that would maybe house 100 people here, And the other thing that was elegant was they said, well, your tether could be a hollow tube-like structure because that would
so
make
that
it stronger.
you could go from one to the other.
You could go from one to the other. And then if you were coming or going to the twin spinning habitats, all you would have to do was is approach it and land in the middle, which is theoretically almost not moving.
Right.
So I'm going to say that's the Radio Science News space station that we would like to propose for those folks.
I think it's a good one.
Write that down in your notebook, and when
I will.
And when they steal it, Robert, we'll thank them.
We will say thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. I'd like to have another. So anyway, I am excited about this stuff, and I think that it marks. It does. I think it really marks a dividing line with a lot of what we're going to be doing. Are we going to sit around and dismally complain and fight over acreage? And
Sure.
yeah,
Because that's what we do.
that's kind of what we do. Now, before I leave this, I want to mention somebody that actually you mentioned to me, Robert, years and years ago, and that's a guy named Bell Bruno.
Bill Bruno.
Now I
what
know
a
that
fascinating
if you're in the
character.
Pittsburgh area, you probably think this is a wrestler. Bell Bruno Sammartino. No, Bruno Sammartino was a famous Pittsburgh wrestler. This is a guy, and the only thing, there's a surprise. When I found this one link, it's because it turns out that apparently Edward Bell Bruno wrote this book, Fly Me to the Moon, an insider guide to the new science of space travel. And at the time, especially when we're talking about space planes and how you get, to and from different places in space within orbitals, Edward Bell Bruno is really a brilliant mathematician who, like I said, it's a little deep in the weeds, but his ideas of how you move from one orbit to another,
Yeah.
he puts it surfing the gravitational field. He devised all of these orbital techniques and mathematics that optimize your ability to travel, like even off, when you actually take off from Earth and get into orbit, and then from the orbit in Earth, how you then get to other places with like the minimal amount of energy. And it's like, it's really a brilliant concept. Now, the only thing that I did find interesting, did you see who wrote the foreword to this book?
I did indeed. Yep.
We have a guy who's sort of ubiquitous in being a spokesman for himself and all kinds of things.
And himself. Yes. Himself and himself.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, who I saw several times talking about the launches here recently. But so, Robert, it says here you can get 19. There are 19 used books available for $3.28. And
Wow.
you know where you would get these books? Look where you can order these books. Amazon.
Probably from Amazon. Yep.
So you could help the space program. And
I could indeed.
and I may order this book. But Edward Bell Bruno was basically a genius of the mathematics of how you launch and
Spectacular
move
genius.
from one orbit to another and back again. All right, I have 2 minutes or so left here. Robert, again, I have trickled away most of the show without getting to all the stories. But
That's okay. The reason that's okay is that our listeners can easily go in and
That's
look
right.
at their stuff. I just want to say that that I first met this gentleman in 2001, and I was beside myself when I realized
what he was saying. Yeah.
what he was talking about, and I remember walking up to him and going, what are you going to do for a meal to a day? And he goes, I don't know, I'm going to eat somewhere. And I said, I'd like to go with you, and I would like to treat
buy
you.
lunch.
And it turned out that when it was all said and done, this guy essentially owned the solar system for a short period of time because his orbits allowed you to get anywhere in the
right.
solar system, which meant that he owned the way to go from one place to another.
Yeah.
All right.
Keep getting that old music here. So
I'm going to try to. My
either that or I could play some more
my
banjo.
iTunes. Oh, well, then I will try to fix this now. No, please do. My iTunes went out when my computer got rebooted, and I've been trying to get it up and going here.
Well, that's right. Everybody knows the original Radio Science News.
Oh, there it is.
I'm going to add my banjo to it if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
Hey, anyway, we'll see you next week. Radio Science News, 11 till 12 on Saturday mornings, rebroadcast at later dates.